Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for the second of 3 videos to mark the milestone of 7 years on Booktube. Now, as I said previously in my first video, the fact of being on Booktube 7 years is frankly remarkable. It doesn't feel like 7 years, but I do appreciate every comment and every view of people on my channel. This particular topic of this second video is to simply speak about the things that I have learned over the last 7 years because of Booktube. This topic was suggested to me, thankfully, because it didn't occur to me to actually talk about this myself, by Catherine over on Twitter. So thank you to Catherine for the suggestion. And this is an interesting subject because obviously I'm going to talk, and for the record there are 7 things that I'm going to mention. Yes, it is purely coincidental that I've thought up 7 things that I've either learnt or evolved and improved over the last 7 years because of Booktube, and that is purely coincidental. And it's been an interesting one because I didn't realise until thinking about it just how much effect Booktube has had on me in a personal manner. But I'm glad that it has, because it's been a very interesting 7 years. And hopefully it's at least another 7 more. Anyway, let's get straight on to talking about what I've learned from Booktube. The first of these is how to think more critically about books. Now this is frankly probably a fairly obvious one for many Booktubers, and I think actually a lot of Booktubers probably also say this one, something they've learned. For me, this is pretty significant though, because prior to Booktube I only read books for fun, which frankly I still only do now. However, when I read a book, I could either think about it more in depth, or I could think not to. It wasn't really relevant whether I did or didn't, because obviously I wasn't having to talk about them, and indeed I didn't know that many people to talk about books with. So when I read a book, it was purely all in my head. Any thoughts I had, I couldn't share or discuss them with anybody. So in this case, if I read a book, it's interesting, I would have a think about it, think, these are the interesting points, and that'd be it. Then I'd put the book aside, pick up another one, and away I go. Now of course I do my monthly wrap up, which I really enjoy doing because it really makes me having to think how to talk about a book. Obviously when I do reviews, which I now greatly enjoy, and actually they're one of my favourite types of video to make, I have to really think about the book in depth, analyse it. I try to talk about the plot, for instance, without giving away spoilers. I also try to talk about the subjects and some of the big issues that a book, obviously if it's that kind of book, will speak about, and finding that sort of balancing point between talking about a book in depth enough to actually make people interested in it and not giving away the whole book is quite hard. And I have to be critical about it, because I can't just say, well, this is a book I love and this is the reasons why. I have to think of what is the downsides of a book, which I probably didn't do before actually, to be honest. And it's an interesting one. The second thing that I've learned is, or at least adjusted, let's say, is to be less judgmental on books based on the synopsis on the back of the book. Now by this, frankly, prior to Booktube, the only way I knew anything about books was purely by that synopsis on the back of the book. When you look, title of the book, read description, this sounds interesting, and that'd be pretty much it. That's all I had to go by. I didn't know many other sort of bookish people. I mean, I still don't in person. I know a few more now, admittedly. And I didn't really know where to go for reviews and such. So that was all I had to go by. And I've read some amazing books over the last 7 years that had terrible synopses on the back that were completely, essentially incorrect, and they sounded pretty terrible, but I still read the book and then enjoyed them. Likewise, however, I have read some books that I thought were truly terrible, and some of the worst books I've ever read, and the synopsis on the back made it sound fantastic and really interesting and really involved. And I read it and I was like, really, this is awful. That has happened multiple times over the years. It will continue to happen. I don't mind that. However, it doesn't happen as often because I now obviously value the opinions of other booktubers and indeed other viewers. People watching my videos have suggested things, and I've greatly appreciated that, because I've got perspectives and ideas that I wouldn't have otherwise had prior to Booktube. So this new perspective and new way of, this new widening of my perspectives especially has been greatly useful, and I really have enjoyed learning about more books and more things that I've greatly enjoyed reading over the years. And the third one is to break my own prejudices about genre in particular. And this sort of sounds like it's related to the last one, and it kind of is, because frankly, prior to Booktube, there are multiple genres that I wouldn't have considered. Because, as you know, and as I always say, my main genres are science fiction with a certain amount of fantasy, with other genres thrown in. However, prior to Booktube, I would have said, oh no, I'm not reading that. I'm a science fiction and fantasy person. That's romance, that's even thriller. I wouldn't have touched horror. No, that's not for me. No. And I would just sort of poo-pooed it, as you say. And I wouldn't have experienced some of the books that I have by this point, many of which are not in science fiction and fantasy, although admittedly some of the all-time favourites mostly are, coincidentally. But there were some fantastic books, though not in those two genres, that I would never have experienced, though, if I had not have had my horizons broadened, like I said about the previous point, and increased massively, because I would have just thrown the books aside. Certain authors I would have just dismissed. I would have said, oh no, that author's known for this thing. No, I'm not interested in them. Now, for instance, I will. I mean, last year, for instance, in 2020, I actually read a romance novel and actually enjoyed it so much. It was actually one of my favourite books of 2020, which is frankly remarkable. I mean, it seems like a miracle, actually, compared to what I was like years ago. For the record, I mean, for example, my sisters, when I was much younger, had lots of romance novels around, well, one sister in particular, and they always looked really terrible. They had usually, terrible cover with a handsome, muscly guy with a sort of headstrong woman on them, falling in love, sort of ideas at the back of the books. I did read them on the back of the book and synopsis, and they sounded just terrible. So that put me off romance really badly. And actually I realised romance can be like that, but they don't have to be. It can be different things, and that applies to other genres. Thrillers don't always have to be big action thrillers. They can be other types. Horror doesn't have to be some sort of horribly disgusting, monstrous things, or psychological horror. It can be other types. So, keep your horizons open, basically, would be my advice, because that's what I've certainly learned, and it's worked out extremely well for me personally. The fourth thing is a certain confidence in myself. Now, of course, over the last 7 years, I've got obviously older in general, and I've got more sort of, I suppose, used to certain experiences in day-to-day life as well. So my confidence would generally have increased by that point, but Booktube has certainly increased the rate of my confidence. I may have got to where I am now, which is, I think of myself as being fairly confident with talking to other people and situations and such, and dealing with things, but it probably might not have been yet. It might have been a couple more years yet before I got to that point. Actually, I know it would have been several more years. So Booktube has basically accelerated me on my personal growth, I suppose you would say, in terms of confidence and ability to deal with things, which I greatly appreciate, because I've done things now in the last so many years that I wouldn't have considered, and I've greatly enjoyed. That will continue, and basically it's making me feel as though I'm a better person, whatever that means to you personally. But I feel as though I'm a better person. I've got a wider range of opinions now. I'm easier going, and just things along those lines. I'm just a broader minded person now than I ever was. And that comes from the confidence, which, definitely been very, very useful. The fifth thing is travel, which actually relates to the confidence, because prior to Booktube, I'd only ever travelled outside the UK once, to Iceland. That was with a friend of mine, and that was entirely arranged by that person. I didn't do anything basically other than say, oh right, which flight am I booking? Okay, I'll book that one. That was literally it. And I didn't book accommodation, I didn't deal with anything. I just sort of went along with it, which was nice. And indeed, I mean, for the record, that was Iceland. It was an amazing week there, but I wish at the time I'd slightly done a little bit more myself. But you know, you can't go back, you can only go forward. And indeed, from that first prior Booktube trip, I've indeed gone forwards, because one thing I have done, other than Dublin Worldcon 2 years ago, the year before that, I went to the San Jose, California Worldcon. I was getting to a point where I thought I would never really get to travel very much, because I thought I wanted to travel. I don't want to travel by myself, but who do I travel with? Because all my older friends I've got and things I've had for years, they're all starting getting relationships and things with children, so travel is rather hard for a lot of people that I know. So I was getting to the case of, well, I have nobody to travel with. Booktube has opened that door, because now I have a bunch of people who want to travel and are able to travel, and I genuinely like spending time with. So the fact that I have went to America and actually booked a flight myself, and actually managed to navigate, for instance, Heathrow, which Heathrow, you know, London airport, has got a reputation for being, you know, one of the world's biggest airports, for being horribly busy and complicated. Actually, it was monumentally straightforward. I went there, I found where I was going virtually instantly, because there are signs everywhere. I mean, I assume they are aware of the fact that they are a giant airport, so they must be aware that they've got to make it fairly easy to navigate. And I had no problems with Heathrow. I got on a long haul flight, which I'd never done before either. Managed that perfectly well. I mean, I wasn't very, very nervous, but I managed it by myself, and I'm quite proud of the fact that I managed that, because I didn't ever think I would be able to, at least not for a very long time, and yet I have. So Booktube has certainly helped with forcing me to do these things, because I want to meet the booktubers, ergo I need to travel to do it. You know, and it's worked out extremely well. The sixth and penultimate point that I'm going to talk about is food, which directly relates to the last point, travel. I have now travelled a lot, ergo when I've travelled I have tried various new and unusual food, at least unusual to me prior to that, because before Booktube my diet was, I mean, it's healthy obviously, but it wasn't very varied. I had the same certain selection of meals day in, day out. I was very unwilling to try any new food, frankly. I'm not going to deny. I was kind of a bit of a stick in the mud, as you might say, in regards to food. And now, with all the travel I've done because of Booktube and such, I have now tried a massively greater variety of food. And obviously, prior to and since the travel that I've done with Booktube, that has now opened my eyes to trying food. And I have tried a lot more food here at home now than I ever thought I would do. And I'm really grateful for this, because I now feel sort of happy in myself. I actually eat a better variety of food. I feel a little bit more worldly, I suppose you could say, you know, and a bit more experienced with things, because, as I said, I didn't try anything, I wasn't willing to try anything, and now my eyes have been sort of opened a fair bit, and I'm now broader minded. Again, you know, that goes back to what I said earlier in the video, and although I actually feel much healthier and frankly much more better in myself, because my diet is even better than it used to be, and there are certain foods now that I greatly enjoy eating, and I just feel physically better in myself as well as mentally as well, because knowing my diet is very, very, very good does help obviously mental health as well, and this, you know, generally makes me a much happier person than I ever was, which, considering I'm an optimist, that's quite an achievement. The seventh and final subject that I'm going to talk about is how amazing, cut that. The seventh and final thing that I'm going to talk about is I learned how amazing the Booktube people, both creators and viewers, can be. Now, over the last 7 years, I have known an awful lot of people. Some of them I only knew for a very short period and I've lost touch with. Some I've known the whole time I've been on Booktube, and are still people that I talk to today. Some of them I have only known fairly recently. Regardless of which of those three categories everybody falls into, I am very grateful that I have talked to all of you, because the exchange of opinions and viewpoints from different countries and different areas of the world has been frankly phenomenal. It has made me think in ways that I wouldn't otherwise thought of. I've experienced things that I never would have experienced before, and I am massively appreciative of the fact that I've talked to so many people, because it's just done me frankly a world of good to speak to everybody and broaden who I am as a person, improve who I am as a person. I mean, I'm a better person now than I was 7 years ago. I mean, sounds, I know, a bit silly I suppose in some ways, but it's definitely true. I feel like I'm a better person in myself and in almost every way, and I'm just really appreciative of that, because frankly I have met some of the people now that I've spoken to, as you know, due to the travel thing, and I really appreciate the fact that I've met some of them, and I would still like to meet a lot more of the people that I've spoken to and continue to speak to. Obviously what with world events, that's a bit tricky at the moment, but I will continue to do so in the future when things get better. And basically talking to the amount of people that I've talked to over the last 7 years has done one thing for me, giving me hope, because all the people that I talk to, you know, yes, we have bad times, we have good times, and we have sort of, you know, mediocre times. Regardless, we're still here for the most part. You know, we are still enthusiastic about talking about books and about every other subject we can talk about, and we still are going to go into the future and basically do better than we have done, because that's, to me, I mean I am an optimist, but that's all I can see happening. So talking to a variety of people about this improves that thought and improves that way of thinking, which I greatly appreciate. And with that said, that is it for this video. If you have been on Booktube for either a long time or a short time, regardless of the length, please let me know what one thing is that you think that you've either learnt or become better at due to Booktube. If there is anything that you can say. I mean, coming up with these 7 points was frankly actually quite hard. A couple of them were easy, like the travel, some of them not always. So yeah, let me know which ones you think that would apply to you. For instance, all my social media links can be found in the description box below. I mean, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.